Welcome in to the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe, presented by Bet Online. I'm Ross Geiger, the former NBA video coordinator, having spent time with the Bucks, Suns, and Knicks. And I'm joined alongside Bruce Bernstein, our four-time Emmy Award winner, who spent more than 3 decades at ESPN producing NBA shows, SportsCenter, and soaking up knowledge from the best hoop analysts in the business. And we're also joined by 2-time Emmy Award winner Michael Worldby Freer, who is a senior writer at StatFactor, specializing in writing advanced statistical NBA reports for various announcers across the league. This is episode number 109, the Derrick White episode, as White was crowned an NBA G League champion in 2018. And as of Monday night, he is now an NBA champion as the Boston Celtics closed out the Dallas Mavericks in Game 5, winning 106-88, and are officially the 2024 NBA champions. Obviously, we have a lot to discuss, lots to react to, and I know I have one extremely excited co-host on tonight's show. But first, BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BLEAV, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. And for tonight's show, it starts right here, Bruce. The Boston Celtics, your Boston Celtics, are the 2024 NBA champs. Congratulations. And much like the team itself, I want you to go ahead and take the stage and just give us a little opening tip.
Well, thanks, Ross, and thanks, Worldby. It was an amazing season by a really impressive team, okay? They went about their business from pretty much the opening night. I mean, this was as close to a wire-to-wire championship as I can ever remember outside of, let's say, the 1996 Chicago Bulls. I mean, they busted out of the gate. They never looked back. We did a podcast over the summer, last summer, where we had Ross's good pal Giannis Antetokounmpo on. And in that podcast, the seed was planted for this team to be the team that it became. Because when Giannis made Milwaukee's front office know that they needed to make a big move, they went out and got Damian Lillard, and that freed up Jrue Holiday, who ended up going to Portland. And we talked about it on this show. I said as soon as he was cut loose, that is the guy Boston needed. And that was the guy Boston needed. Jrue Holiday, will never get the pub that Tatum and Brown get, and, doesn't, have, that kind of, the 2 J's, but he was the 3rd J. And in the postseason, he was just enormous for those guys. Even in Game 5, I mean, he had 11 rebounds, 15 points, always made the right play, always was a great teammate. It was just such a satisfying season for me. I mean, they went 80-21, including the regular season and the playoffs. That's unbelievable. And they did it as a team. They were just a very likable group because they always kind of played for each other. They played hard. The coach, Joe Mazzulla, was maligned frequently, but he, had the respect of the team. People tried to say, oh, the 2 J's, they can't get it done. And a lot of people were doubting this team, right up until their finals prediction. And I was saying all along, they're assuming this is the same Celtics team that they saw in previous years. It was not.
No,
it was not. They had Jrue Holiday, and Marcus Smart was a beloved Celtic, but Jrue Holiday was a major upgrade over Marcus Smart for this team. They brought in Kristaps Porzingis, who maintained his good health for most of the way. But it was just, I said so many times along the course of this season, they just look like a team that has that look this year. They just have that look. They're all business. They're here to, do nothing but win. My finals prediction was more or less on point. I had said Celtics over Mavericks in 6. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 5. That ended up turning out to be true. I just felt like, I embraced this group from the beginning and really it was so much fun to follow this team this year. It was, as a fan, you dream of a season like this. And I can say with very little hesitation, this is probably one of the 5 best Celtics single season teams of all time. And that's saying something.
Yep. And now the Boston Celtics are the best franchise of all time, if we're counting championships, with their 18th to give them the lead over the Los Angeles Lakers in that regard. We'll be kind of just watching tonight's game, seeing the Celtics hoist the trophy. What is your reaction to, just the season as a whole for Boston?
The culmination of an outstanding, one of the better seasons we've had in the NBA in recent memory. They were the most dominant team, 64 wins during the regular season. Nobody else had 60. They had the most efficient offense in NBA history. And on top of that, they had the second best defense this season. So they were great at both ends. They dominated in the regular season, and then the bullseye was on them to begin the postseason. Let's see how they were going to do. They played Miami, that beat them a season ago, and what did they do? 14-0 right out of the gate in game 1, and that series was basically over. How they respond every time there's adversity, whatever you want to call it, was really impressive. I mean, look, they had their worst offensive game of the season, regular season or postseason, in game 4 on last Friday. And what did they do? They come back and have their most efficient game offensively in game 5 when they need it the most. When they need a big moment, they go out and score 106 points on just 89 possessions. That's ridiculous efficiency. They go on a 9-0 run to end the first quarter. They go on a 19-7 run to end the first half. That's when the game was really over, by halftime. They had their best first half of the season, of the postseason in this game when they need it most. How are they going to respond after a loss? After people are starting to whisper Dallas's name again, and what do? They just blow the doors off. They're at their best, and there were very few occasions when they were not at their best, and when they were, we all jumped out. What's going to happen? The sky is falling. They lost game 2 to Miami. The sky is falling. We forget that Miami hit 1 billion threes in that game, and and how did Boston respond? They win the next 3 and go home. They lose the game to the Cleveland. How are they going to respond to that? Boom, they blow the doors off the Cavaliers. They sweep the Pacers. Everybody had momentum because they weren't supposed to be in the conference finals. And then they get to Dallas, and there were people picking Dallas. None of us here picked Dallas, but we thought it'd be a closer series. And they just dominated this series, with the exception of game 4. It was a dominant season from start to finish.
Now, when I think of this Boston Celtics season years down the line, there's 3 things that are really going to pop out for me. Number 1, they made some tough moves this summer. Of course, obviously, Porzingis was a masterful one to bring him in to be that starting 5 for the team, have Al Horford be that starting 6th man, as you always like to refer to him, Bruce. That was big. Obviously, the Jrue Holiday kind of situation that happened, jumping on that and, moving Brogdon and Robert Williams, 2 guys that were very impactful players to that rotation. Not an easy move. As much as it made sense, it's still not the easiest thing to do. And then, of course, Marcus Smart. I mean, there was a lot of criticism, questions at times from emotional Boston fans on whether or not that was the right move, and they proved that one right. And that goes the same with Joe Mazzulla. I mean, a lot of people called him second row Joe most of last year, not giving him the respect that he might have deserved at the time, especially taking on such a tough job. And all question marks with him as a coach have been erased. I think everyone has seen what he's capable of doing as far as leading a talented group of players to play team basketball on both ends. They did it from start to finish, from game 1 of the regular season to the last game of the finals this year. And then last but not least, I think we certainly sometimes forget this. The amount of criticism Jaylen Brown got just last year, can't dribble with his left hand, got a max contract, overrated. Conference Finals MVP, NBA Finals MVP. And if I was to be more thrilled, there's no one I'm happier for in this series than Jaylen Brown. I think what he did throughout the playoffs was extremely well-deserved. I think good karma went his way too with how he handled the All-Star weekend, the only star to be in the dunk contest. I mean, I think from start to finish this year, the way Jaylen Brown bounced back from so much criticism that followed him into the start of this year and how he handled himself throughout this year, I was completely blown away and impressed with how he responded. And it proved to be one of the turning points for the Celtics team, if you ask me, Bruce.
One of the things about Jaylen Brown from pretty much the day he set foot in Boston, he has always demonstrated leadership skills, okay? He's a solid guy. He's big in the Boston community. He donates a lot of money, donates a lot of time. He's heavily involved in continuing to be educated about, non-basketball stuff. He takes classes at Harvard. I mean, he's just a solid guy. And it's true. I mean, and even Celtics fans, he was much maligned by Celtics fans. There were a lot of them that, just go on Twitter and look, they wanted him traded. They always said, people would always emphasize his flaws. But as you said, he, after last season, he went to work. I mean, his handle got much tighter, his aggressiveness on defense in this series. I mean, I think he won the MVP in this series more for his defense than for his offense, because Tatum actually had better, scoring average in the series. Okay. But it was his relentless defense on Luka. I mean, look at him in game 5. I mean, he went over every single screen. He didn't go under a screen all night. He just dogged him relentlessly. So yes, Jaylen Brown, everyone will still feel probably that Jason Tatum might be a little bit better than Jaylen Brown, but you know what? After this season, Jaylen Brown, he's stamped his, jersey going up there someday, along with, hopefully a couple more of these if they can, keep the band together.
Yeah. And we'll be watching tonight's game 5. It seemed like it was Boston's night to begin with how the first half went. But do you think that Peyton Pritchard half-court heave, his second one of the playoffs at that, do you think that kind of solidified it as far as this is just Boston's night?
It pretty much put a stamp on the series. I mean, conclusion, you didn't see Boston blowing a 21-point lead at the half, but they were rolling. By midway through the second quarter, you had the feeling that Boston was not going to be denied on this one. They're just a better team. They're a better team than Dallas was from, if you go player to player. There's just Dallas does not match up. Their best hope was they need their superstars to be superstars, and they may have gotten their points, Luka did, but they didn't have their superstars are not super tonight, and Boston's were. I mean, they were good enough. And there was never a point from about the early in the second quarter on where I felt, okay, Dallas is going to still has a shot in this. It just felt like there's no comeback, against this really, really dominating team that responded once again to a real embarrassing loss. Let's call it what it is. I mean, game 4 was an embarrassment for Boston. They didn't show up. Had their worst, least efficient offensive game in the season. They had like 26 points in the paint in game 4. So what do? They go like 30 points in the paint in the first half in game 5. They decide, we didn't do this right. Let's do it right this time. And they go out and do it. We didn't have a good offensive game in game 4. Let's get it right. And they blew the doors off offensively in the first half of game 5. So, there was never any time where I felt that Boston was going to relinquish this lead once they got control of it.
Ross and World B, one of the things I think that we learned in this series, well, we kind of knew this already, but I think a lot of fans don't always get it. It's all about matchups. I mean, Dallas's backcourt carved up Minnesota's defense in the previous series. And Minnesota was the number 1 defensive team in the league by most measurements, right? I mean, you would tell us that pretty much on a weekly basis, World B.
Yep.
But what Boston had defensively that Minnesota didn't have defensively were these dogs on the perimeter. I like to call them the wardens, and you can add Jaylen Brown to that, because those were Minnesota had nothing like that in their defensive. Their defense was more focused on their bigs and their interior defense, not going out there on the perimeter and just absolutely harassing those ball handlers. And that was why I really felt that Boston was going to have this series, because I felt like, okay, Dereck Lively, PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., those guys will, they'll get a few buckets here and there, but they're strictly bit players on that team. And the guys that were going to be guarding the stars were Derrick White. How about Derrick White? Breaking his teeth, diving for a loose ball, having Lively land on him. Jrue Holiday, who just is like relentless defender. And again, the aforementioned Jaylen Brown. So it really showed you that the matchups really are everything. And Boston got, their perimeter defenders just did a wonderful job all year, but especially in the series.
Yeah, no doubt about it. They definitely wore down Kyrie and Luka, both of which in that Dallas backcourt did not have a great series overall shooting the basketball. I know that before the show started, we were looking up some of those three-point percentages for both those players, and it wasn't pretty. The thing for Dallas, too, is they kind of just ran out of gas finding a third wheel. I mean, as we had mentioned on our previous shows in the Western Conference Finals, it kind of turned out to be the PJ Washington series, and there was really no PJ Washington in this series, nor did anyone really step up outside of Tim Hardaway actually in Game 4, which helped make it a Maverick win. So not much help there outside of the Dallas powerhouse backcourt, and got to give a lot of credit to that Boston perimeter D, as you alluded to there, Bruce. So I want to take you back real quick, Bruce. I did ask you after the conclusion of Game 3 on our special edition of this show, once you took a commanding 3-0 lead, if there was part of you that wanted to see this series go back to Boston to win it there. Now, does it taste – now that it's over and you've secured the crown, was it a little sweeter that you did close things out in Boston tonight rather than in Dallas?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, the crowd was incredible. Just seeing the reaction, of the team and the fans and everything. Yeah, but see, I'm not one to – I mean, look, if I was going to the game, I might have felt differently, But, I mean, they were both – I'm always concerned, what if somebody gets hurt? I mean, yeah. Last year in the Game 7 of the, Eastern Finals, Tatum hurt his ankle. Maybe they would have lost that game anyway, But that, an injury to one key player can change everything. So I don't really, didn't really want to see them have to play a single game more than necessary. But that said, I'm happy for the Boston fans. And like I said, everyone said this was going to be a 6-game series, and it went 5. Okay. So it all worked out just fine.
Yep. And World B, kind of being the Mavericks supporter all year, and it obviously played out favorably for you as they were the Western Conference champions. What do you take away from what they did this playoffs? I mean, obviously when it came to the finals, do you think there were some adjustments that needed to be made that weren't made on Jason Kidd's behalf, or do you think he played all his cards as best as he could and Boston just was the total complete package?
There were some things that he could have done. Our favorite Maverick, as it turns out on this show, was Jaden Hardy. Yep. And he just didn't get any run. And we were all left wondering why not. He just, when he gets on the court in the playoffs, he'd been producing. And we didn't see a whole lot of them in this series, which is, one thing you got to wonder about. I don't think it was a lack of preparation for Dallas. I just don't think they had the personnel. Bruce mentioned about matchups or whatever. I don't necessarily disagree. They just don't have the players that Boston has. I mean, we talked about this other shows. If you stop somehow Jaylen Brown, if you somehow stop Jason Tatum, you still have next in line is Derrick White. And next in line is Jrue Holiday, whoever. And then I even mentioned Porzingis, who, when he's in the lineup, is probably their third option. For Dallas, if you stop Luka, if you stop Kyrie, next in line is PJ Washington. And we saw what he can do when you count on the most in the biggest game and face elimination. He goes 0 for 5 from 3-point range, and his most noteworthy thing was trying to act like a punk to Porzingis on defense. That's the only thing his lasting memory of Game 5 is. So they just didn't have the players. Overall, you can't ask to go from a 5 seed to NBA Finals in that brutal Western Conference, the teams they beat. It was a successful season. There's no other way to look at it from a Dallas standpoint.
In Game 5, it was, in Game 4, Dallas completely outworked Boston. And I mean, that was reflected in every stat column on the sheet, but I always look at rebounding. When I look at rebounding is just work, it's work. It's not glorious. It's just work. Well, in Game 5 on Monday night, all 5 Celtic starters had at least 8 rebounds. Think about that, 8 or more rebounds by all 5 of the starters. The only player on Dallas that had more than 8 rebounds was Luka. Nobody else on their entire team had more than 6. That was, PJ. So really, Boston just came out at the very beginning of the game and they just outworked them. They jumped on them, and it was just it was sort of like the polar opposite of Friday night.
Yeah, it was absolutely a gang rebounding game for the Boston Celtics. No better example of that than Jrue Holiday actually led the team in rebounds with 11. But speaking of rebounders, the second best rebounder for Boston was Al Horford here tonight. He had 9 rebounds to go along with 9 points. And, of course, there was a lot going on after the game about Al Horford, 17 years in the NBA, finally winning his first championship. I mean, Bruce, being a Celtic fan and a guy that's always admired Horford's impact on this team, just how thrilled are you for a veteran guy like that to finally get his shine?
When Al Horford came into the league with Atlanta 1,000 years ago, okay, yeah. I watched him play a game, and I said, this guy is an absolute warrior. He just is. I always admired him from a distance when he was in Atlanta. He was an all-star there. They had really good teams there. They had a 60-win team there one year. They had like 4 guys on the all-star team. He was one of them. But, Al Horford in a lot of ways became like kind of a mini version of Kevin Garnett on Boston from the standpoint of locker room leadership, professionalism, and also coordinating all the defensive schemes on the floor. I mean, KG was always the guy that kept everybody on a string, and that's what Al Horford did in the locker room, on the team plane, in the bus. I mean, Jason Tatum said in his post-game comments he's his favorite teammate ever. He said he taught me how to be a pro. And Al Horford has always been a special player to me. I was really upset when he left and signed with Philly for a pretty big contract. But I was so happy when he came back. And I know Boston fans don't really like Philly fans, but tonight Philly fans got to see former Sixers Al Horford and Jrue Holiday celebrate a championship.
Wow.
While Joel Embiid probably jinxed himself for the rest of his career by touching the trophy the other night on the pregame show. That he should have thought more about that one. But I like Embiid. Maybe he'll get one day, but it might not be anytime soon.
Yeah. And World B, being our Knicks correspondent here on tonight's show, World B just left us here for a minute. So I'll ask you, Bruce, because Kristaps Porzingis gave it a go tonight. They said before the game that there was going to be no minutes restrictions for him. He played 16 minutes, obviously 5 points on 2 of 4 shooting. Didn't hit a 3. He took 2 of those and only had 1 rebound. But how big do you think that was just for the team that he gave it a go here tonight to just make sure, they were at full health. There were no questions, and, he was going to lay it all on the line for his teammates.
I think it was really important. I mean, look, they would have probably won this game if he didn't play the way they played tonight. But the fact that he put in the work to try and get himself healthy enough to go out there and play, it just showed, that he really wanted to be a part of things, and he was a part of things. I mean, all season long, he was the guy that no teams really ever had an answer for, because whenever he would get the ball with a shorter guy on him, they would hunt out, like switches so that they could get him the ball. And he was just deadly. And, his rim protection throughout the season was huge. I think I had said going into the season that if he could stay healthy for like 65 to 70 games and then hit April in good health, that they were going to be tough to beat. Well, they didn't quite make it to 60 games, and he didn't quite make it to full health during the playoffs. But I'm hoping that, when he comes back next year and is able to be, have a summer off, I don't know if Latvia's in the Olympics, if he's going to be playing for anybody. But I hope he puts himself in bubble wrap somewhere, has a nice, 3-month vacation, come back healthy in training camp in September.
Yep. And with that, Bruce, unless you have anything else you want to discuss about tonight's game, I was going to take this to break, and we'll discuss real quickly here what's next for these two teams. And we're back with the start of the second half here, and that's the big question here, Bruce. Obviously, the NBA season is done. We have the draft in 10 days, but let's just stay focused on these two teams that just played into literally mid-June. Obviously, a quick turnaround here with the draft and then free agency right around the corner. So I ask you, and we'll start with the Celtics here, what's on the horizon for this team moving forward?
I don't really think you're going to see a whole lot of changes for these guys next year, because really they have a young team. Most everybody is, signed. I mean, Tatum's going to sign his max deal over the summer, but I mean, he's signed for next year regardless. Jaylen Brown's supermax kicks in next year. Derrick White is signed through next season, but they're going to be having to look at him. Al Horford is signed through next season. Porzingis is signed through the next 2 seasons. Hauser is signed through next season. Pritchard is signed for 4 more years. Young guy Jaden Springer that came over from Philly is signed for next season. Xavier Tillman is unsigned as of now. I hope that they sign him, because I really was glad when they got him. He didn't play a huge role. He didn't even take his warm-ups off on Monday night. But, I mean, the Celtics are set, man. I mean, you couldn't possibly be in a stronger position moving forward than they are. They've got, and now they have, even Joe Mazzulla. I mean, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Joe Mazzulla might be, Erik Spoelstra 2.0. He's got a championship. He's got the backing of management. He's a young coach. He's got a talented team. I just don't see, Charles Lee is going to be leaving, I guess. He's moved on, and that'll be a significant loss. But I look, Mazzulla seems in command of things at this point. And really, I mean, Boston, who's in a better situation than Boston at this point? I mean, I can't think of anybody.
No, it's hard to argue against the reigning champs, especially as you just laid out the contract situation. Things look good there. Now, another thing that certainly has popped up here in the news this past week, I'm sure you saw it. Of course, there's some talk about Kawhi Leonard being replaced on Team USA, and the name that's popped up to replace him has actually been Celtics guard Derrick White. Wanted to get your thoughts on just Derrick White potentially being the injury replacement on Team USA, playing in the Olympics with not a lot of downtime. Do you have any concerns with White continuing to play later into the summer and not have that much time to rest before next season?
Well, look, I mean, that would mean that they have 3 guys on the team, right? They would have Tatum and Holiday and Derrick White. It's mildly concerning, but I mean, Derrick White's not going to be a headliner on that team. I don't think he's going to have to, he's not going to be playing big minutes, nor is Holiday, I don't think. I mean, those guys will be coming off the bench. So, I mean, it's certainly a nice, prestigious honor for a guy like Derrick White, who, has given everything you can give. I mean, Derrick White is like Dennis Johnson 2.0 for old-time Celtics fans. He has a very similar kind of, MO. Lockdown defender, great teammate, reliable scorer when needed, and just, intangibles, everything for the team. So look, and the guts that he showed on Monday night when he basically got his face bashed in going to the floor, his teeth got all jacked up and stuff, came back in. Hopefully he's going to come back with a real nice smile and get some nice dental work done over the summer.
I'm sure he will. Now, World B, I want to ask you the same questions. Curious to get your thoughts here on just the fact that, Tatum, Holiday, and potentially Derrick White will all be playing this summer with Team USA in the Olympics. If you were a Celtics fan, would you have any concern there with just the lack of downtime?
No, I wouldn't have concern about it. I think, as Bruce mentioned, Derrick White, Jrue Holiday probably won't see a ton of minutes by comparison to others on the team. I don't know if anybody really gets overworked during the Olympics, even on a team like Team USA. There's so many great players, and they usually, with the exception of a couple of other nations to push them, usually don't have that much in the way of trouble. So there will be some, it should be a fun competition. It should be a fun Olympics, but I don't think being overworked, the time traveling, the time preparation, that stuff is a little bit concerning. But in the end of the day, this is worked out for a long time now, going to the Olympics and measuring up afterwards. I don't foresee it being an issue. You worry about injuries, obviously. You don't want to see anything like that happen, but that can happen at any time. You just, you can't compete under that worrisome microscope.
Yep. And Bruce, shifting gears here to the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, we also want to touch on them, on what's next for their franchise moving forward. Do you see them making significant adjustments? And, what do you foresee Mark Cuban, Jason Kidd, and Nico Harrison trying to do this summer?
Well, I think, most of their key guys are signed at least through next year. The only guy that's unsigned going into next season is Derrick Jones Jr. And honestly, Derrick Jones Jr. is a nice player. I mean, but they could probably replace Derrick Jones Jr. with somebody else and probably not, lose a lot. I think their future is good. I like the fact that, Jaden Hardy is signed through next season. Hopefully he'll get a chance to play more next year because we were all very impressed with him. Yeah. Dereck Lively looks like a guy who's going to be, like a solid long-term player. I don't see Dereck Lively as an all-star necessarily, but I see him as like a JaVale McGee type of a guy who could be a contributor on really good teams because he doesn't try to do too much. I mean, he kind of, stays in his lane. Luka is Luka. Kyrie is Kyrie. If you were asking me right now, you think they'll make it back to the finals next year? I'm not going to say yes, but and they don't have a ton of draft choices coming up. In fact, the only draft choice that I see them in the first two rounds is the number 58 pick, which is almost the tail end of the second round. I mean, even Boston has two picks in the first two rounds. Dallas, because they traded a lot when they got Kyrie and stuff like that. And so, but they should be good. I mean, look, Luka's best basketball is probably still in front of him. I think he's learned a lot. I mean, he's 25 years old. I mean, he's going to the Hall of Fame, right? We kind of know that now. So he's got a ton of upside. Kyrie, I don't know if his best basketball is still in front of him. He's 31, 32 years old with a, PJ Washington, we'll see about him. I think he's a good player. I think he's in their plans. We talked about Lively, Jaden Hardy, Gafford is signed. So, I mean, they're going to be bringing back a lot of the same guys, but hopefully, Hardy will get a chance to play more. And Josh Green was pretty impressive at times too. So, I mean, if you're Dallas, you're feeling good about your future, but the West is tough, man. Real tough. It's not. It doesn't get easier. No.
Yeah. World B, what's your forecast on the Mavericks moving forward?
I agree with what Bruce said. I see them. I think they have 6 of their top 7 scorers signed, not through just through next season, but through 25, 26. So what you see now is basically what you're going to see over the next couple of years. Their world got a whole lot better. We talk about how Kyrie, how that worked out since they made the finals, but their world got a whole lot better. Their season got a whole lot better at the trade deadline, when they picked up PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. I gave PJ a lot of static here for his Game 5 performance, but the facts are the facts. They became a really solid defensive team, a top 10 defensive team right after picking those guys up. They went 16-4 to end the season. If you throw out the last 2 games when they basically didn't play anybody, those don't count. But the 20 before that, they were 16-4. They were one of the best teams in the league, and the reason was their defense improved. So I agree with Bruce. Luka's best basketball. You got to figure out a way to keep him healthy. How that happens, I don't know. He clearly, well, I'm not making excuses for him because he didn't play, particularly well in this series. He wasn't 100% either. Kyrie is a question mark. As Bruce mentioned, he's got a lot of work. He's got a lot of tread on his tires for 31, 32. He came out after 1 year at Duke. He's been in the league a long time, so he's going to be the question mark. What do you see going forward from him? And then it's who's your number 3 guy?
Yeah,
that's a big question. Look at Boston. Boston's got 4, maybe 5 that you can turn to. You can you can lose a guy like Porzingis and not miss a beat. That's pretty impressive for a lineup. And as you mentioned, Bruce mentioned, geez, there's still Oklahoma City. There's still Minnesota. There's still Denver. We're not even going to get into the Lakers. We're not going to get into the Clippers, their situation. So there's a lot to fight through. They got through it this year. Getting through it multiple times in the West, that's hard.
Yeah, and if they want to do themselves some favors with finding a third wheel piece for this team, I think it starts with shooting. They've got to find a perimeter shooter that can help that backcourt out. And when people double or the defense collapse in the paint on drives, they've got to have a reliable shooter out there. Given their cap space and situation, even if it's a Max Strus, Sam Hauser type guy, Corey Kispert type player, they are desperate for a 3-point shooter just to be out there playing decent defense, solid offense, knocking down open shots, and that's got to be one of their number 1 priorities.
And one of the problems, you're exactly right, Ross, and one of their problems was, and I'm not dumping the whole thing on him, but that guy that you're mentioning was supposed to be Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah,
it
was. Yep.
And he just bottomed out in this series with the exception of Game 4. He was spectacular in Game 4. But where was it the other 4 games? He was MIA. And in a blowout game clincher tonight, he doesn't even get 9 minutes on the court.
Yeah.
So that tells you what you need to know about. That was the guy that you mentioned. He could have been that guy. And maybe he will again. Who I don't know. But that was a real problem for them. And that was a costly ineffective player on the court there. You couldn't put him on the court. If a shooting guard can't shoot, you kind of run out of things for him to do.
You pointed out that they need a 3-point shooter. They also need better perimeter defenders too. Their perimeter defense is just not good. They relied on Kyrie and Luka to outscore people and whatnot. Their interior defense is good, with Lively back there, Gafford, those guys, they're serviceable bigs. Derrick Jones Jr. has the deep part, but his 3-point shooting is really very streaky. He blew a kiss to the Boston bench after making one the other night to put them up by 33, which I was like, nobody seemed as outraged about that as I was, but so they need the 3-and-D guy, and that's like the most valuable type of player that exists in the league right now. They're not so easy to find, unless you draft one.
During the regular season, I talked at length about how Boston shoots the 3. That's their MO. 47% of their shots in the regular season were 3s. That led the NBA. Well, number 2 in the league was Dallas at 44% of their shots coming from 3. So you're absolutely right, Ross and Bruce. They need consistent shooters. to be able to do what their offense wants, what they want to do on offense, and that's shoot the three, just like Boston does. The problem is Boston was a much better shooting team, so they got 41% of their scoring from threes in the regular season. That led the NBA. And Dallas was, while they were third, was at 37%. So that's a nice drop off there, 4%. That's a nice drop off, but that's their game. They want exactly right. Now, can they find it?
Yep.
Maybe. Oh no, go ahead, Ross.
I was just going to say, I wanted to touch real quickly on Dereck Lively because, boy, I was not too high on him as a rookie out of Duke. Obviously had a mediocre freshman year at Duke. I mean, obviously flashed the potential of being a big impact piece at the next level in years to come. Probably needed a year or so. And he did it in year one, and want to give him his flowers there because he definitely deserves it for all the hard work and development and stride he made this year. But I like JaVale McGee. I think that was a good name for him, Bruce. I think if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you're hoping that's the floor for him. I think they're really hoping he can be kind of become a Nick Claxton type value in the NBA as far as what he can provide on both ends of the floor. And with those two talented guards that can really set you up, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for him. And I'm being the development guy on this show. I certainly can't wait to watch him continue to develop in Dallas and see what they can do with him with time.
Nico Harrison did a really, really nice job even figuring out a way to get that guy last year. Because if you remember, Dallas had drafted Cason Wallace, okay? And then Harrison turned Wallace and Davis Bertans and traded them for Dereck Lively after the draft. I mean, that was an awesome move by Nico Harrison. I mean, because, look at, Cason Wallace might be a nice player. Davis Bertans is an overpaid guy who had one good season and made a bunch of money being the Latvian laser. But the laser hasn't shown that brightly since he got his money. But Dereck Lively, man, that guy's a keeper. And
he's a future.
Yes. Yeah, he is.
And the Mavericks don't make the finals without their trade deadline moves, too. Obviously, as much as P.J. Washington was a doozy in the finals, they don't get to the finals without P.J. And Gafford certainly brought his physical presence down low for the course of the playoffs, too. So kudos to the front office and Dallas. Obviously, they know what they're doing, so it's going to be a fun offseason tracking what kind of adjustments they make, looking to try to bounce back from this finals loss this year.
By the way, real quick, last thing on them. They did take a gamble. They traded for Kyrie, and they had to sign him in the offseason. That was a big gamble because you remember last season, it did not work out at the end of the season after picking him up. They did not this trade did not look good, and they had to make a decision. They ponied up to get him, and obviously that was the right decision. So to your point, they had some decisions to make, and they pretty much hit every one.
Yeah,
guys, I have a question for both of you about Kyrie.
Okay,
we said a few minutes ago how important it would be for Dallas to get a really, really good 3-and-D guy. Would you consider trading Kyrie if you could get the right 3-and-D guy for him, knowing that you still have Luka, you have Jaden Hardy, who might be ready to step in and take on a bigger role? I mean, is Kyrie somebody that you would consider trading if you were running Dallas?
I would consider trading Kyrie, but when I think of a 3-and-D player, I think of a guy like, I think the best one in the league that could be available is Mikal Bridges. And we know Joe Tsai and the Brooklyn Nets aren't going to be like, yeah, we'll take Kyrie back after what happened there. So,
right.
I mean, I just don't know who would have the guts to trade for Kyrie, but certainly would consider it just given the circumstances of team need. Will be.
I don't see a market for him being traded. Now, hey, there's a sucker born every minute. And so that's it only takes one. I don't foresee him getting traded because of his contract and age. I don't see why anybody would be salivating over getting Kyrie at this stage of his career. But hey, we wondered who would be salivating over James Harden after last offseason, and there go the Clippers to pony up and take a chance. So it's certainly possible. I wouldn't put it past Dallas to send out feelers because, look, Boston made some key moves, had some tough moves to make to better their team, and they did it. And they went from a conference finals to an NBA championship. Now, Dallas may have to make some big moves in order to establish themselves ahead of everybody else in the West. It's certainly possible. That would be the person to kind of dangle out there to get the kind of player you want back. I just don't know if there's a market for Kyrie at this stage.
Could the Knicks dangle OG Anunoby and something for to bring Kyrie to New York City?
They got to sign him first. OG's going to be a free agent, number one. And number two, I knew when I said there's a sucker born every minute, I knew that's where you would be going next, Bruce. I set it all up. The Knicks were suckers about 5-6 years ago. The front office aren't a bunch of suckers anymore, thankfully. So I don't foresee that as being a realistic destination for Kyrie. I really don't want to have to give up my Knicks fandom. I've been this close for many, many years of giving it up. I don't want to give it up because of this one.
Yeah. Well,
all right. We'll send him to New Orleans for Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I feel like this has been a pretty good preview of what's to come here on the 48 Minutes podcast into the summer. Lots of fun conversations, speculation, and of course, staying up to date on the news. But for this edition of the 48 Minutes, we're pretty much done here. I want to thank all our listeners for their support throughout the regular season and playoffs. And once again, congratulate Bruce Bernstein, our NBA champion on the show here, as his Boston Celtics win the 2024 NBA Finals, winning their 18th league-leading title in franchise history. So, Bruce, congratulations. And to all our fans, thank you. And that will do it for this show. So thanks for tuning in. And we'll be back with you next week with some draft stuff. We'll have to come prepared with some draft homework. So I'm giving homework out to everyone, and hopefully our listeners will do some prep themselves. And we'll be back next week to be sure you're up to date on all things NBA. Thanks for tuning in.